While I was working on the script of Avalon with Barry Levinson, as well as being involved in casting and numerous other jobs, I started to think about my credit on the film. Because I hadn't been able to get the casting credit I thought I deserved on Rain Man, and because Danny DeVito thought I deserved associate producer credit on Tin Men, the first film I worked on with Barry 5 years earlier, I decided to broach the subject with Barry. I nervously asked him if I could get associate producer credit on Avalon. "Oh, I'll have to ask Mark," he said. Mark Johnson had been his producer on all the films Barry had directed to date. Now, I was beyond shocked that he said he would have to ask Mark when I'd worked so closely with Barry in so many capacities. We almost had our own form of shorthand. He knew he could rely on me for anything he wanted and could trust me. This extended to his wife Diana too. The fact that I was like family meant that they could both call on me for anything they wanted, whether business or family related. I'm not sure that either of them saw me for who I was and what I was capable of. Although later, when I'd left Barry, Diana said that he told her, "I don't know what Marie does, but whatever she does, no one else can do it." Now, if only he'd realized that early on and given me the respect and the money to go with it. Well, the good news was that Mark Johnson agreed for me to share associate producer credit with Charles Neuwirth, who was the unit production manager on the film, and who went on to produce many major films, including Forrest Gump. So at least that was a step forward for me. In my new capacity as associate producer, I also took on the task of PR on Avalon, dealing with any issues the actors had, as well as being the local media go-to person. I was interviewed by Richard Scher on a show called People Are Talking, which he'd previously co-hosted with Oprah Winfrey over a decade earlier. Of course, she'd since moved on to bigger and better things. 10 months after Avalon was completed, the premiere was held at an old movie theatre in Baltimore, and I arranged for the after-party to take place at the Railroad Museum. It was a very unique location, and I managed to secure it with no difficulty at all. I also arranged for vintage buses to transport the actors and guests to the theatre and then the museum for the party. I did so much more, but I'm glad to say that it was a huge success. Naturally, Barry's family were thrilled to see their story, and themselves, represented in the film. Sadly, Barry's dad, Irv, was too ill to attend the premiere, but was able to have a private screening before he passed away. However, from what Barry told me, I don't think he was able to fully comprehend the film and the story that Barry had so sensitively captured in honour of his dad, and of course, his mother's family. Avalon is not only their legacy for future generations, it's also a sad commentary on how family relationships changed with the introduction of television and financial success. I love what grandfather Sam Krasinski says in the film as he sits watching TV in a retirement home. "If I knew things would no longer be, I would have tried to have remembered better." Although it might not turn into a movie, I strongly believe that every single person needs to write his or her life story, no matter their age. But it's especially important for our elders. How many of us regret not asking questions of our parents or grandparents who've died with their stories inside of them? To sit at the knee of a grandparent and hear stories of times gone by certainly seems like a thing of the past. Yet those stories make up the fabric of a rich and textured life and can give insights into our own existence. Knowing where we came from is not just about being able to put a family tree together. It's about the value of the lives on that tree. What are their stories? What have they experienced? What can I learn from that life? What can I share with future generations? It's a known fact that recalling life experiences and accomplishments is not only therapeutic, it also enhances our appreciation of who we are today. Every life has a value. To quote Mark Twain, "There was never yet an uninteresting life. Such a thing is an impossibility. Inside of the dullest exterior, there's a drama, a comedy, and a tragedy." During the editing and post-production of Avalon, I was working with Barry on a couple of other projects, including a script entitled Toys, which he'd written with his ex-wife Valerie Curtin a decade earlier. He wanted to revise it, with Valerie's permission, of course, so he dictated the changes he wanted to make, and I incorporated these into the new version of the script. The film was made in 1992 by 20th Century Fox with Robin Williams in the lead, but I didn't work on it. Barry, his wife Diana, stepdaughter Michelle, and his two young sons, Jack and Sam, were now living in a big, beautiful house in Bel Air, an exclusive part of Beverly Hills. The home office was very cosy, and young Sam was often a visitor, although not encouraged when Barry and I were working. Although both Sam and Jack had their own nannies, when Barry and Diana were away on international trips, for instance, they both went to Japan, where Barry received yet another Rain Man Award, I would sleep at the house. I was the in-case-of-emergency person. My boyfriend Brian stayed over a couple of times, and 5-year-old Sam loved him, mainly because Brian made him laugh with his incredible conjuring tricks. We had a lot of fun. After Barry had returned from his travels, he had a call from Warren Beatty about a script he'd been working on for quite a while with controversial writer James Toback. More on him later. The script was about the gangster Bugsy Siegel, and Warren wanted Barry to direct it. The problem was that the script was over 400 pages long, whereas an ideal size for a screenplay is 120 pages. So a great deal of work needed to be done to chop it down to the right size. Barry told him that he was interested, but naturally wanted to take a look at the script. He also explained the way he worked with me on scripts. Warren asked if I could pick up the script from his house on Mulholland Drive so that he could meet me. I must admit I was a little nervous at the thought of meeting the iconic actor, who was also famous for being somewhat of a Lothario. But I knew I wasn't about to swoon dead at his feet at the sight of him. That just wasn't my style. As he opened the door of his palatial home, where he'd lived for many years, Jack Nicholson was his neighbour, I immediately felt at ease with the handsome Warren Beatty. He was charming, of course, but genuine. I liked him right away. He invited me in, and we sat in his huge living room while his mother, Kathleen, who was visiting, I think from Virginia, was in the kitchen making coffee. He introduced me to her when she brought in the coffee, and it was all very relaxed. Warren asked me where I was from in England and what brought me to the States. He was truly interested in me as a person. I told him that my first job in LA was with Sam Goldwyn Jr., and he said how much he'd admired Sam Goldwyn Sr., one of the pioneers of Hollywood. We really did have a lovely chat, and I was impressed with Warren's sincerity. Perhaps this is what was so attractive to the many women in his life, apart from his looks, of course. Armed with a 400-page Bugsy script, I dropped it off with Barry's secretary, Jennifer, at the offices of his newly formed production company, Baltimore Pictures, which was in Century City. "Did Warren come on to you?" Jennifer asked. I laughed. Of course not. He came on to me, she declared with glee. I looked at her quizzically. You know, when I spoke to him on the phone, she clarified. Good for you, I said, as I walked away, smiling and shaking my head. Next time, working in a Bel Air cafe on Bugsy, and time to split. If you're enjoying my episodes, my social media guru, Horatio, has asked that you please like the recordings, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when I post my next episode on Sunday. Many thanks, and your support is greatly appreciated.